Pasha Shoftim, Deuteronomy, the 16th chapter. We start in the 18th verse. So 16th chapter, verse 18. Today we will examine the key verses that help to clarify the necessity of rabbinical courts and halakha, etc., etc. This here will help you to really come to a good understanding as to where it was first established and how it works today. If you wouldn't mind reading for me verse 18 through 20, please.
Judges and officers shall you appoint in all your cities, which Hashem your God gives you, for your tribes, and they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. You shall not pervert judgment, you shall not respect someone's presence, and you shall not accept a bribe, for the bribe will blind the eyes of the wise and make just words crooked. Righteousness shall you pursue, so that you will live and possess the land that Hashem your God gives you.
Okay, let's start off for the first. We all pretty much have known about the establishment of judicial system within Israel from the time Moshe met with Yethro, his father-in-law, who said you need to set up a system that's a little bit more efficient. This system, we get actually a pattern from this in our own court system, in which we have the Supreme Court, we have state Supreme Courts, we have federal court systems, we have state court systems, all the way down to municipal, and then there's one more level below municipal. There's a county, but what's it called? Justice of Peace, I think. There are some justice of peace. It fits in little small parts of counties. But what is interesting, verse 18 says, you should appoint judges and police officers. This is very specific. Why judges and police officers? Well, we'll look at some of the commentary that comes from Rashi, and we'll find that there's actually a couple of ideas that we can examine in this. But we know that the judges had the responsibility to mete out punishment, because Moshe gave instructions to the judges at the sin of the golden calf and at Pinchas to go bring about judgment to those people who had participated in those sins. You remember this? And so they had ended up seeing to the fact that they were killed. The question is do police officers in this sense, are they the executioner? Are they the person responsible for executing the law? Well, in reality, no, that's not the case. The judges are responsible for that being meted out. The police officer's role is very much like a law enforcement officer today, and they're there to enforce the laws. So that means that in the midst of each tribe, they were to select individuals who were to be righteous judges, people of right standing, and then they were to establish police officers or law enforcement officers that worked with the judges to make sure that the rule of law is followed through with. They were the ones that would remind people on the street, that's not appropriate, you don't do that. Or if they saw somebody that might be violating one of the Torah laws, they would go correct them and let them know this cannot happen again. And if it got to a bad place, they would actually take them to the judge. And then they would be brought before a judge, and then they would be, properly arraigned in front of a judge. But the interesting thing is that Torah law, much different than our law today, where you can be actually arraigned and judged and even probably sentenced on the witness or the voice of a couple of witnesses that are of not very good character, or they're not very noble character. This is a little bit different. The judges and police officers want to stress the role of the law enforcement officers according to Rashi. He contrasts this with the role of judges who merely decide the law without implementing it at all. However, this is what Rashi says in response to the idea that the judges only just decide the law. Rashi merely wished to inform us of the role of police officers. He could have done just that without touching upon the issue of the judges. In his commentary in Parshas Devarim, Rashi has already explained the role of police officers as implementers of the law. I appointed police officers over you for your tribes. These are the ones to bind a person or strike them with a whip at the judge's order. So in the sense, a judge could say, listen, if this guy does this again, then you have the permission to bring automatic correction to this individual. But it was different from the laws that we have today. What is the major difference between Torah law and the law that we have in this country today? Does it still provide judgment against an individual? Yeah. Integrity, yeah, well, that's a big one. That is a major one. But what is the main difference? And that is correction. It's the correctional system. We call it the Texas Corrections. What is it called? TDC, Texas Department of Corrections.
Criminal justice.
Yes. Used to be called the Texas Department of Corrections. And they realized we're not correcting anybody. We're making them worse. So now it's called the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And I was involved during the time having dialogue with a lot of community leaders trying to bring about a different view on how you mete out judgment to an individual, also justice for the family members. And one of the problems is our system sets up to punish a person, but there's no way to really bring justice to the matter. No one ever gets rewarded. No one is, unless a family sues the individual, but my goodness, most criminals don't have money to be sued for. So the whole system is about putting people in, incarcerating them, and putting them away. Torah Judaism and Torah law is about bringing correction to rectify a situation. What do you do when a person does something they shouldn't do, and how do you approach it? These judges needed to be individuals who could not be blinded by bribery. We can understand what bribery would blind you, would cause you to taint your justice. One of the key words here that we see in verse 18, he says, appoint judges in all your gates. Appoint judges in all of your gates, according to one translation. Who has that translation? Does anybody have that? Appoint the judges in your gates? I don't know. The idea is at the city gates, or at the establishment of the city gates, this is in the literal sense. Every city should have a judge assigned to the city, like we do today. There's a deeper meaning that comes from Chassidus that talks about an individual has to establish, in a spiritual sense, an obligation to judge one's soul, to judge themselves before God. Excuse me. Sorry, got a frog in my throat. So the idea is this, that just in the same way that a city would learn a new restriction or a law that comes down from the Sanhedrin, which would be like the Supreme Court, that city or community would immediately need to establish the new ruling that came down from on high from the Sanhedrin. And that new ruling had to be carried out by the judges and the police officers of that local community. And so what the Alter Rebbe writes in Tanya, chapter 13, the evil inclination is no more than an example of a judge or an advocate who offers his legal opinion, but nevertheless it is challenged by the second judge, which is the godly soul. The final verdict follows the ultimate arbitrator, God himself, who assists the good inclination by means of a godly revelation and to the godly soul, so that it may gain the upper hand. What is the Alter Rebbe saying? It says our body, our mouth, our eyes, our ears are like the gates of our neshama, our soul. And that everything that we bring into that should be judged by Hashem. Where does Hashem sit in that judgment is in the place of the Yetzer Tov. It's in the good inclination. The Yetzer Tov constantly examines everything that comes through the faculty of the inputs of your body, the eyes, the ears, the mouth, what comes in and out of your body should be judged at the same level that one would be judged at the gate of a city. You see, ultimately, we do not have, because we don't have a temple, we can't go to the Sanhedrin today. Now, they do have a provisional Sanhedrin, but in Jewish life, in the Orthodox Jewish community, this system still pretty much is working, right? And we see this on a regular basis. For example, if I were to contact Rabbi Greenbaum on a particular ruling, which I did this a few weeks ago, I approached him with a simple question. This is what the question is. I would like to know, what is your opinion on this? Now, am I asking literally what is his opinion? Or am I asking him what is his opinion in the light of his rabbi, who in the light of his rabbi, who in the light of his rabbi goes all the way back to Moshe? That's what we're saying. This system already has all of the elements are there. So, for example, if we were, in a couple of weeks, we'll be having our class with Rabbi Zalman Weiss. And in this class, if we have a discussion on something on halakha, we'll ask, what about this or X, Y, Z? If he doesn't know the answer, who is he going to go to? He's going to go to his rabbi, who will ultimately end up going to a Beis Din, which is a council of judges, who will give what the normal ruling is. Now, if for some reason it goes all the way to the Beis Din, and they still don't know, then ultimately it ends up going up to the highest level, to the chief rabbi of Israel and the council of judges that are sitting at that level. This system exists today. And that's what's kind of odd. You don't realize that there is a separate system outside of the normal Israeli court system that has to do with Torah law. In the Orthodox community, if you have a judgment against another Jew, you bring them to the Beis Din, not to civil court. Just the way it's done. Why? Because you believe that Torah law supersedes all of the laws that should be in the land. Hashem's rule should be the first, right? Let's go to chapter, 16. Let me read this here for exact. Rabbi Nachman says has some good thoughts here. Verse 20. Verse 20, it says, righteous, or Zaddik. It says righteous. Where's that verse? Read verse 20 for me. Righteous. Oh, here you must pursue. You have to live and possess the land that God, your Lord, is giving you. The word righteous is repeated in this verse because one who does acts of righteousness and charity not only attains righteousness for himself, but draws rectification for evil. By pursuing righteousness, a person draws life and vitality down. From this verse, we learn that we should pursue the righteous tzaddik of the generation. Just as Torah is eternal and is available to each and every generation, the Torah is found in the house of study of the tzaddikim of each generation. So this idea is that the Torah needs to be drawn down by the righteous. Pursuing righteous is the key. Now let's talk for a moment about the pursuit of righteousness. How does one pursue righteousness? You first have to know what righteousness is, right? Righteousness comes from what? The study of the word of Hashem, right? So we know that righteousness comes from the study of the word of Hashem. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Now, an individual can do righteous acts and not know Torah law, correct? Why? Because much of the Torah law that could be followed has just good common sense to go along with it. It makes sense. You don't steal from an individual. You don't covet somebody's property and take it from them. If you see something that is broken, fix it. And if it's not broke, don't break it, right? It's just the pretty common sense stuff that we learn. So the idea is that in the matter of bringing judgment, there is a responsibility for every person to pursue righteousness in their own, with their own responsibility. It is interesting that Zechariah, the 13th chapter, tells us that in the day of Mashiach, that the Mashiach will appoint judges, but it doesn't mention anything about police officers. Why do you suppose judges will be there but no police officers? There's no need for it. Why? Because there's no inclination that would cause someone to do evil. Why do we need judges still? Because we still need to understand the halakha of living life, the little nuances of the Torah that requires us to focus on that. Now, the issue in verse 8 of chapter 17, it says, if a matter of judgment is hidden from you, such as status of a blood sample, a guilt of innocence of the accused, a status of a leper's mark, or of any kind of dispute in your city, you should get up and go to the place that God, your Lord, will choose. Now, what is he talking about? Where is he talking about going? Going to the Beit HaMikdash, right, where the Sanhedrin is, and there bring the matter to that judgment. So it's in essence like bringing the matter to the Supreme Court, okay? Should you come across a difficulty when clarifying a law, you must go up to Jerusalem where the Sanhedrin sits to clarify the law. The Sanhedrin possesses the true interpretation of Torah as it is situated in the temple, the house of God, which stands between heaven and earth. Therefore, you must go up to that level, ascending above the materialistic thoughts and misinterpretations to gain a true understanding of the Torah. One of the things that we battle against in our modern age, especially in America, is, especially Texas, we pride ourselves on being what? Independent, free thinkers, don't tread on me, we don't need any more laws. I don't know what else we can think of, but you know what I'm talking about. It's sort of, what's that? Come and take it. You know, you have to pry my gun out of my dead cold hands type deal, right? I mean, that, you know, we understand the spirit in which that was crafted. But what that has materialized in this postmodern day are people who want to be lawless. They do not want to be governed. They do not want to be managed, and any level of governance in their life is a dictatorship, or if they are religious, any level of governance is legalism. We've heard that from the other side of religious belief. And so this idea that legalism is something we run away from. Torah, Judaism, says that the only thing that gives us life is the Torah. And to follow the Torah and the nuances of Torah and the utmost of excellence, and to follow the Torah with the highest level of expertise requires us to know what to do. It's better to have not done something than to do it wrong, or to do it and it not count for anything, or to do it and disgrace Hashem's name before people. So this idea of having a matter that is not visible, is not quite clear. I think it was Sunday in the class, someone asked the question about the idea between meat and milk. And do we eat meat? You know, why do we not eat meat with milk? And why does this verse specifically say this? Does it actually literally mean no cheese pizza with with hamburger, yeah, pepperoni, yeah, with ham. No, but you know, you only can use kosher ham on that. Okay, just remember. So the idea, why can't you have them? Because the Torah law says it. Now, if we were to sit here and try to justify or to come up with a decision that is outside of rabbinical decision, we don't have that right to do that. We don't have the right to do it. And in a moment, we're going to talk about, well, where does Torah Judaism and the law of Torah end and rabbinical laws pick up? And it's kind of interesting to have that dialogue, because there is a difference between halakha that comes directly from oral Torah and that which comes from rabbinical rulings centuries later. And how does that fit into the big picture? Torah law, when I say Torah, I'm talking about the written Torah law, that part of the Torah law, was a bit ambiguous, right? There are just some things that it says to do, but it doesn't give descriptions on what you should do. So this is the reason why we believe so strongly that the oral Torah is as important as the written Torah. Why is it important? Because it breaks down the elements of Torah law to help us to understand how we are to fulfill the law. We wouldn't know how to, for example, bring certain offerings except to just bring it without oral Torah. We wouldn't know what keeping the Shabbos is without oral Torah. So we see all of these things. But when we have a situation which is just a question, you just don't know, then it needs to go to a higher level. This is the reason why today rabbinical courts or beis dins are so important in the Orthodox community, because these small matters matter a lot. It's the small attention to detail. What we have learned in our study of the Ramchal, help me, Path of the Just. In the Ramchal's writings, he talks about those individuals that have a strong sense of attention to detail in their life, and that they reach a level of chacham, excellence, and great wisdom in their life, and they reach a level of perfection, and that it is possible, regardless of what the world has said, that it is impossible to live a righteous, perfect life. The Ramchal says, no, it's very possible. You can attain those things. How do you attain them? By having attention to detail and understanding the small little rulings and processes to approach the Torah law. Trying to see if there was something else. Oh, here we have, he says verse 11. I want to go to verse 11. Could you read verse 11 for me? 17:11.
According to the teaching that they will teach you, and according to the judgment that they will say to you, shall you do. You shall not deviate from the word that they will tell you, right or left.
Okay. Any questions about that? So, for individuals that come to you and think that you've lost your mind because you've taken on the yoke of heaven, and says, well, these laws are no longer in existence because they've already been taken care of by somebody else and you really don't have to do them. We have to understand, when God says that whatever they tell you, in accordance to the Torah, when they teach these things to you, and the laws that they tell you, do not deviate from the word that they tell you, either to the right or the left. So how do we get around this idea to not add to or take away from the Torah? Are you guys thinking about that while I'm thinking about that? How do we get around that idea? Well, if you were going to take that at such a very strong literal sense, then you would have to ban the whole idea of an oral law that explains the Torah, which we can't do. And then you would have to, as a society becomes more modern, you would have to try to figure out how to fulfill the commandments of God in a modern society. Back when this was given to Moshe, the details of the Torah law were such that a modern society requires a judge or a council or a Sanhedrin to make decisions about that society. For example, what is fire? Is fire and electricity the same thing? And when you turn a light switch on, am I creating a spark? I mean, these questions have to be asked and discerned. Why do we ask these questions? Why do we want to know them? Is it because Hashem is trying to make our life miserable? No. It's we love Hashem so much. And we so dearly want to please Him because He's our master. He's our Adonai, right? He's our master. If He is our master, then we want to do everything we can to please the master. And that is why we need to know the details. It's as if you work for a boss and the boss comes in and gives you a general order that says do X, Y, Z, and you need some clarification. You would be foolish to go out on your own to work that job without all the details on how you should do the job. And any boss worth his leadership would expect you to ask questions, at least ask questions to other people to find out what you should do. But the idea is once you find out, do not deviate to the left or right. So that means do not be liberal nor too conservative. Make sense? Do what they say. Now, we have a discussion that we will come across in the next few weeks in the Path of the Just, where there are people who are, they want to go extra and above and beyond the call of duty as an individual. An individual that wants to go above and beyond the call of duty, for example, it says in halakha that if you eat dairy products, then you don't eat meat for how long after? Do you know? No. I think it's 7, isn't it? 3 to. From dairy to meat is 3 hours. If you go from meat to dairy, it's 6 hours. Yeah. So meat to dairy, it's longer because it takes longer for the meat to digest than dairy to digest. So the idea is there are some people say, well, to keep from anywhere going near breaking that, I just won't eat meat or dairy till the next day. Is there anything wrong with that? No, there's nothing wrong with that. But the idea is this, is as a community, we are not to put restraints or liberalities on Torah law that affects everybody. Stay right with what the Torah says. Don't deviate to the left or the right. Don't make it too liberal. Don't make it too loose. And even on yourself, I think that it would be smart, especially for those who are either have become Baalei Tshuva or B'nai Noach. Don't try to do more than don't overdo it. Just better to not discourage yourself, to be righteous the best way you know how and move on. This verse teaches us the importance of having faith in the Tzaddikim or the righteous judges and the Torah sages of each generation. Even if it appears to us that they are wrong, we must still follow their directives. To the degree that a person does stray from his faith in the Tzaddikim, he finds it difficult to find a cure for his afflictions. For just as medicine are composed of herbs and potions, so too the Torah is composed of letters and words. Each word creates an angel that receives vitality from that word and transmits it to the medication that is under his control, or the herbs, so that the grasses or the herbs or the medication through the power of Torah will heal them. The Tzaddikim are the only ones who know how to blend the Torah teachings correctly, so they will bring healing. Thus, if one's faith in the Tzaddikim is blemished, this ability to attain healing is diminished. One of the things that I believe that many individuals that come out of other religions, one of the things that you find difficult is putting trust in the Tzaddikim, putting trust in a righteous rabbi. Why is that? And we all pretty much can figure this one out. And that is, you've been disappointed by being raised your entire life believing the truth of what a particular denomination or individual said, and then later on you find out that was all rubbish. And how can I believe anybody? How can I believe anybody? Well, one great thing is we have a litmus test or an acid test. That acid test allows us to compare what Torah emits and what Torah radiates, and compare the person who is the righteous Tzaddikim, compare his words to the Torah. If he is saying something that is opposite from the Torah, you need to seriously question whether you should follow that person or whether he's even a Tzaddikim, right? But a person who is a righteous man will always navigate according to the Torah law. Now, there are going to be times that you're going to hear a ruling that comes down and you go, I don't get that. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. Why did the rabbis decide to do it this way? Why did they decide to do this? Is there anything wrong with asking the question? No, not at all. But ultimately, you got to do it. Why do you have to do it? If you're a Jew, why do you have to do it? Says to. Don't deviate. That's all it is to it. Okay. Verse 21, you should not even plant for yourself an idolatrous tree. I'm sorry, not 17, 16, 21. Let's go into, I want to go back. And I want to wrap up on these two ideas. 16:21, you shouldn't plant for yourself an idolatrous tree, let alone worship it. You shall not plant any tree or build a house on the Temple Mount near the altar of God, your God, which you will make for yourself. You should not set up for yourself a monument consisting not even of a single stone, which God, your God, hates. You should not offer to God, your God, an ox or sheep that is blemished or that is slaughtered with any incorrect statement or intention, for that is an abomination to your God. Verse 2 of chapter 17, can you read for me? Wow.
If there will be found among you in one of your cities, which Hashem your God gives you, a man or woman who commits what is evil in the eyes of Hashem your God, to violate his covenant, and he will go and serve gods of others, and prostrate himself to them, or to the sun, or to the moon, or to any host of heaven, which I have not commanded, and it will be told to you, and you will hear. Then you shall investigate well, and behold, it is true, the testimony is correct, this abomination was done in Israel. Then you shall remove that man or that woman who did this evil thing to your cities, the man or the woman, and you shall pelt them with stones so that they will die. By the testimony of 2 witnesses or 3 witnesses shall the condemned person be put to death. He shall not be put to death by the testimony of a single witness. The hand of the witnesses shall be upon him first to put him to death, and the hand of the entire people afterward, and you shall destroy the evil from your midst.
This is not talking about people of the nations, right? This is only talking about the people of God, the Jews. First, it talks about the prohibition of building structures or altars or reusing or repurposing idolatrous images, correct? That's pretty much a no-brainer there. And even go as far as not bringing an offering to Hashem that looks righteous, but your intention is more pagan than Torah-driven. Does that make sense? If you do, it's an abomination to Hashem. So it is possible to come to Hashem with pagan intention, with wrong intention, and it be offense to Hashem. This is what I wanted to deal with in closing here. If there is found among you in one of your cities, which God your God has given you, a man or woman who does not want, who does what is evil in the eyes of God, your God, and violates His covenant by going and worshiping other gods, the sun, the moon, any heavenly bodies, which I have not commanded you to worship, and he prostrate himself before them, then you are informed, and you are informed by witness, and you hear the case, investigate them thoroughly to see that their statements of testimony are consistent and true, and this abomination has occurred in Israel. What are you to do? Bring them and the witnesses who has committed this wrong, and if you have the proper witnesses, how many witnesses do you have to have? 2, right? The 2 witnesses come and they say, we've seen this, these two witnesses have to be chacham, wisdom utmost, experts in their own Torah life, right? These guys cannot have questionable background. It's not like, one pagan's going to call the other pagan a pagan, right? That's not going to happen. So you have these individuals going to come, but it says if it's not by two witnesses, then that person should not be put to death. But what about this question? What happens if a judge or if a police officer in this case is patrolling the streets of, I don't know, find us, Rafah, and he goes through and someone says, hey, my neighbor, I think, has been doing some really strange things. They were like naked in the backyard and dancing around a calf and burning weird incense, and I really, something's up. So he goes to investigate it, knocks on the door. When he gets there, the person has got a buffalo head on and ears around his neck, and it's pretty obvious. This looks like he's doing some pagan stuff. So he says, I just heard from a witness that you're doing some strange things. Is this idol worship? And the guy breaks down and he starts crying. I've committed an abomination before Hashem. Yes, I've picked up these idols. I found it at a market and I just was curious. Hama. Is he to be taken out and stoned? Why? Let's say if there were two witnesses. Aha, there we go. He's repented. So if he's repented, according to Rashi, you can't take him out and stone him because he's turned his heart. What is the ultimate goal of correction anyway? To bring repentance. Listen, when I hear of the level of righteousness that many of these tzaddiks of Torah Judaism live before us, I'm thinking, how am I going to stand before Hashem at any level without being judged? I mean, there's the fear of God. But at the same time, I look at something like this and I realize that what we have to maintain is this strongest level of course correction in our life. And as the Hasidic masters would say, is we guard the gates of our neshama, our eyes, our ears. We're careful what pollution we allow to come in. If something begins to influence us and kind of like, well, I know God said this, but I would like to do it this way. Anytime we find ourselves, immediately we go before Hashem and do tshuva and ask Him to forgive us, and He will forgive us. We come before the judge without prompt, without the witnesses. And in our life, what are the two witnesses that normally show up? Heaven and earth is a good one. I never thought about that. That's a good one. How about the Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov? They come to accuse you. The thing is what you do is you go before Hashem as soon as it comes up and you admit it, you deal with it, and Hashem will forgive you. And that is the beauty of that. In the end, I would like to read this. It is a scriptural decree that the courts do not execute a person or administer lashes to him as a result of his own admission, but only by the testimony of the two witnesses. This scriptural decree is somewhat rational because a person's soul does not belong to him but to God, as the verse says, "All souls belong to me." The question would be, well, how is that? If souls belong to God, doesn't all the money and silver belong to God? And if you steal money and silver, you're still going to be judged even if you admit it. What? You're responsible for paying that back. Here in this case, a guy can simply say, I've done it, I'm sorry, it will never happen again, and there's no judgment on him. Why is there no judgment? Because his soul belongs to Hashem, and only He can take that soul. If he has repented, then the soul should be left up to Hashem to remove the soul from the body and not through the judgment of death. Does that make sense? Okay. Next class, we will go into the authority of the high court and appointing a king and the rights of the Levite. That concludes this portion of the class.